Hey, what's up, Liron here. This video goes out to anyone who struggles with knowing when to finish a painting. A lot of people get into overwork land where they just keep adding and adding, and at the end they're unhappy with the result. Now, if I'm being honest here, I've never had this problem. I always felt like, if anything, I didn't always know what to add. But I want to show you because this painting is in an interesting stage. Now, as a side tangent, you may recognize this. This is another picture I took at the OCD restaurant. I have a large painting, but this is a different scene from that same dinner, from that same evening, of just different action in the kitchen. So I'm currently at the moment where I'm done with the large shapes, with the details, with everything. The only step really missing is to add the highlights. So for all intents and purposes, this painting is done. And you can see right below me, there's a reference photo and you see all of these beautiful lights. So how do I know, personally, when it's time to almost wrap up the painting? To me, it's about the large, medium, and small shape. So what do I mean by that? This blue here in the background could be considered as a shape. Now, as long as it's in the right value and in the relatively accurate shape, it's done. I don't need much more than that. If you look at these chefs here, all over, there's 1, 2, 3, 4. There's actually 4 of them here. If I look at these folds and clothes and creases, and I'm like, I'm happy with the details, it looks good. Would I be happy if I stop now? If the answer to that is yes, I just stop. I don't second guess. I don't think, what if I will add this detail, I will add that. I don't care about any of that. What I care is, at this point in time, will I be happy with where the painting is at? If the answer to that is yes, I'm okay with it and it's done. So one of the things that I did try and achieve with this version of the painting, because it is another version of a different scene, but very similar to the original painting, is I tried really getting a lot of vague areas. So you see a lot of these shapes here, the separation between the apron and the dark pants. It's very not well defined, right? If I hold it up to you so you can see it up close, there's a bit of window coming from the outside. You see it's not really well defined. I want these vague edges. Same here for this area where there's, I don't know what it is, even there's some kind of a device there on the wall. I love these vague areas. So if I scan the painting and nothing really stands out to me as out of context, out of, everything feels relatively there, then I know I'm good to go. Now, there may be a few small details that I'll end up adding. I do see a pattern of tiles on the wall. But pretty much this is done. Now the only step left, as I mentioned, is to add the highlights. So there are quite a lot of them here with the lamps, reflections. These main lamps are going to be a major, not necessarily focal point, but a supporting focal point. Same goes for the wires coming down there. They're mostly highlights. I just painted the shadows first, and I'm going to add the highlights later on. This is mainly what's left, and I think it'll be fun if I go ahead and end that and kind of come back and explain what I did and wrap it up. So let's do that. So just to describe a bit of what I'm doing, I am indeed confirming that the large areas are as dark as they should be, and in my check and tests, this area, especially that main table, shelf, desk, whatever it is, need a darkening, as well as the guy on the left. Once I have all of these main shapes darkened, then I can start working on some of the smaller details. For example, pushing these highlights to be bluer by adding a thin coat of blue. And then I can start adding the details. I love that tiles there I talked to you about earlier. On the right, they're in dark. And on the left, interestingly enough, you'll see in a second, they're light. They're highlights. I'm blending the border between this guy's hair and the background. Here we go, light tiles because of them being so close to the light source. And we come to the most fun part, and that is putting in all of these highlights into the lamps. Honestly, I really enjoy it. And look at how much depth it gives to the painting and how much more different spots you have to look at. It really anchors you to the scene. It's not just a large composition, also the small details. And here it turned out I needed one more coat on there. That happens sometimes, very often actually. And back to the highlights. I wanted to really cram them in on these lamps. I really wanted the lamps to shine almost like a starry night, if you will. And some of these beautiful wavy highlights on that metal surface, some highlights on the clothes to bring some of the details of the fabric and the stitches and all of that, and lastly darkening the hair to make the focal point punchier and more contrasted with the background. So I used a really dark black color there. And this is pretty much it. Okay, so mostly done here. Hopefully seeing how I approach things help you get a better sense of that stage where I decide, okay, the main shapes are done, and then I finalize. As you've seen, I did go back and make a few small corrections like this. I needed to darken it. So sometimes once you start adding those details in, some of the context changes and improvements and new changes are necessary. But overall, very simple, pushing all the big shapes to be as dark as I want them to, and also the correct color as much as possible, and then moving in with those final details that are flashy, they catch the eye, they look cool, but they're not the thing that really makes it or breaks it. It's more about the overall shapes and composition. And finally, some smaller details, readjusting the context to make sure it works well. Now, I am not done. I will reserve the final few stages. I'm going to do it on my own, peace and quiet, kind of really diving deeper into smaller areas and finding those nuances I want to bring out. But this gives you a good picture as to what it feels like, hopefully, to see the painting in its final stages and just know. It's more about knowing that it's done. It's not really about, any guesswork. I try and leave that out of there. For me, it's usually instinct and knowing. So I'll follow what feels right, and then I'll just look at it and know what the right thing to do is. Now, you may be at a point where you don't know, and that is perfectly fine. One thing that can help is distance. The closer you are to something, the harder it is to see. The more familiar you are with it, the harder it is to see. So I would say on a very practical sense, how do you get distance? You just walk away from the painting, and I'll often do that. I'll put the painting down, go do some errands, come back and look at it from afar, from up close, and really re-examine it. Sometimes I'll find that I need just a good night's sleep to really see the full context. Sometimes it will just appear before me. But the thing is, I think if you're receptive to it, it will come. Which may sound a little cliche, but I find that true. As long as you're receptive to it, and nothing comes by force, really. So I can tell you don't force it, but I know if you're going to force it, you're going to force it. I'm not the one who will stop you from it, but just knowing that may give you more context. Nothing comes by force. It's all about receiving the impression. I believe that's my experience, actually. So yeah, I hope that makes sense. If you struggle with, adding more and more details and overworking, very often, just as a closing kind of statement, very often it's not about adding too many details, because if the details are correct and accurate to your vision, you can add more and more and more details. The thing is, usually I think when people struggle with overwork, it's really adding all the wrong details. And what I mean by wrong, again, is not the thing you actually see there. Very often people add the details they believe are there, but aren't really that significant. So you end up highlighting and bringing forth all the things you didn't want to, and you end up not showing the things you actually wanted to. So it's not about right or wrong. It's more about what's the impression you're getting when you look at the scene, and actually being able to convey that. That's what I at least find in my experience. I hope that makes sense. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to check out the courses, links to everything down below. If you want to support my work, check out the Patreon. I want to thank everyone who does support me on Patreon. If you want to receive credits at the end of the videos, go ahead, check that out. And yeah, thank you so much. We'll see you in the next one. Take care.